So understanding the quadrants is important. So let's take negative reinforcement. You said you put the leash on to implement some negative reinforcement to enforce the bed. Now, this is where you get into understanding negative reinforcement is two parts. Part one is your understanding of the pressure and release. The concept of we put the leash on, he steps off the bed, we apply pressure, he gets back on the bed, pressure comes off. But then you have the motivation side of things. In order for negative reinforcement to work, the dog has to be motivated by the negative reinforcement that we're providing. Under moderate circumstances where there's not a ton of distractions and stuff like that, the dog may be motivated enough by negative reinforcement in the form of leash pressure on a plastic pinch collar enough to comply with it in that setting. But in the heat of somebody actually coming in, the motivation of that pressure on the leash, it's meaningless to him. So even though your timing is perfect, because the motivation isn't there, it's still not going to work. That's why I talk a lot about when we're training and we're using our individual quadrants, we have to make sure that two ends of the spectrum are appropriate, meaning clarity and motivation. And when I talk about clarity, what I mean is our timing good? Are we releasing the pressure in the same spot? Are we giving the reward at the correct moment? Are we giving the correction at the correct moment? Are we being consistent enough about providing it? All of those details of like the handler side of things. From there, the motivation has to be there. The dog has to care enough about the pressure provided or the consequence provided or the reward provided in order to be compliant. And neither works without the other. So we could have perfect clarity, like I'm sure your timing was good with your leash pressure, but because the motivation wasn't there, he wasn't compliant with it. And on the contrary, we could have really high motivation. We could have an e-collar all the way up and using continuous pressure, but if our timing isn't good, if our clarity isn't there, that's going to be meaningless to the dog as well. So that's where the art of blending the two together. And you start to realize then we have to understand the quadrant we're using, but we have to understand how do we apply that quadrant in a way that the dog cares enough about. What type of negative reinforcement is going to be appropriate? What type of reward is going to be appropriate? What type of punishment is going to be appropriate?